talking about the books or sharing the ideas from Xue Mo's live session. We are talking about something much bigger today. Why are scholars from Canada, Norway, the UK, Mexico, Peru, and the United States beginning to seriously study the works of Chinese writer Xue Mo? And why translators, professors, literary critics, and scholars of world literature gathering together to discuss desert literature, spiritual realism, consciousness, suffering, mythology, translation, and Eastern philosophy. I think this is not only about one writer, it reflects a deeper question in our age. Modern people have information, modern people have technology, but many people have lost inner meaning. And when a civilization begins to feel spiritually exhausted, people naturally begin searching again. Searching for silence, searching for meaning, searching for consciousness, searching for a language capable of speaking about suffering and transcendence at the same time. And perhaps this is why these international scholars are becoming interested in Xue Mo's works. Because his works are not simply stories, they attempt to explore the structure of human consciousness itself and the relationship between suffering and awakening, the relationship between reality and spirituality. Hello, Simon and Loic. Welcome to our channel. Thank you for your time being here. Today's topic is really special, so stay with me. Hi, Tucker. Hello, good blessing from China. Please subscribe to our channel if you're new here. Thank you. So, also the relationship between local culture and universal humanity. Yeah. So tonight, in this live stream, I want to introduce some of the scholars who are participating in this international dialogue, which will online tonight. And at the same time, we can also learn some vocabulary related to literature, philosophy, translation, and world culture. I think the language also expresses the level of human consciousness. So if you're also interested, you are also welcome to join these weekly Zoom dialogues, because this is not merely a lecture, it is a living bridge between cultures. Hi, Tucker, you from India, welcome. Welcome, and we have a Zoom dialogue between Xue Mo and the international scholars this evening. What time? It's 8 o'clock Beijing time. 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock Beijing time. Okay, first I will introduce the scholar host, Chen Yanjing, a senior editor or publishing and senior editor and researcher specializing in the works of Xue Mo. She holds a master's degree in modern and contemporary Chinese literature from the Department of Chinese Language and Literature, Peking University. Since 2010, she has edited over 40 books by Xue Mo, among which are the luminous Mahmouda series, the Deathly Diamond Heart, the Wild Fox Ridge, the One Man's West. Xue Mo interprets Dao De, Lao Tzu, and Suo Salang, and she has written dozens of research papers, including going to Xue Mo's home and Xue Mo keywords and Xue Mo mythology from the Chinese cultural original point. Xue Mo Code, and the Xue Mo Code was published in 2020. You can join at 8 o'clock p.m. So she graduated from Peking University with a master's degree in modern and contemporary Chinese literature from the Department of Chinese Language and Literature. Hi, Wanderer. Hi, welcome, Wanderer Monk. What a nice name. Oh, hello, it means for hello. Hi, welcome. So she will be the host for today's dialogue. And honestly, for people who understand Chinese academia and publishing, Peking University represents one of the highest intellectual traditions in modern China. And as I said before, since 2010, she has edited over 40 works by Xue Mo. But what I think is especially important is she's not merely an editor working behind the scenes. She is also someone who has spent many years trying to systematically understand, organize, and interpret Xue Mo's literary work. She has written dozens of research papers on Xue Mo's literature and philosophy. So, including works such as Entering Xue Mo's World, Xue Mo Keywords, Xue Mo Mythology from the Origin of Chinese Culture, and Xue Mo Code. And I think this is very meaningful. Because when literature begins to generate its own academic vocabulary, its own interpretive system, and its own scholarly discussions, it means the work is beginning to move beyond individual reading into a broader culture and intellectual space. Beyond ordinary broader culture and intellectual space. And her book, Xue Mo Code, was officially published in 2020. And in many ways, her work has helped create an important bridge between Xue Mo's literature and contemporary Chinese literary scholarship. So tonight's dialogue is not just a casual conversation, and it is supported by scholars, translators, literary researchers, and international academics who are seriously engaging with questions of literature, consciousness, culture, spirituality, translation, interpretation, and world literature. And the next one I'm going to introduce is Professor Dr. Ricardo Morato. He is an internationally renowned scholar and sinologist, distinguished professor at the School of Foreign Languages at Tongji University and vice director of the Research Center for Chinese Discourse and Global Communication, former full professor at the Graduate Institute of Interpretation and Translation, Shanghai International Studies University. He serves as the series editor-in-chief of the Interpreting Studies book series published by Shanghai Foreign Language Education Press, as well as the series editor-in-chief of 3 major routledges. Through these roles, he has helped build important platforms for the global dissemination of Chinese scholarship and literature. In 2025, he was awarded the prize Friend of Chinese Literature by the China Writers Association. Hello, Karuna. Hello. Thank you. Thank you for your support. So many old friends here for this live stream. I'm so glad to see that. And thank you for your time. So this evening, 8 o'clock p.m., there will be a dialogue between Mr. Xue Mo and the international scholars. And one of the attendees is Professor Dr. Ricardo Morato. So he's an internationally renowned scholar, translator, and sinologist. So what makes his work especially important is not only his academic background. It is that he has spent many years building bridges between Chinese literature and the international intellectual world. He serves as the editor-in-chief of the Interpreting Studies book series published by Shanghai Foreign Language Education Press. He is also the series editor-in-chief for 3 major routledge academic series. And for people who may not know, Routledge is one of the most influential academic publishers in the world. So this means Professor Morato is not only participating in academic discussions, he is also helping shape the international platform through which Chinese literature and the Chinese thought are introduced to the world. Through his editorial and academic work, he has helped to create important channels for the global dissemination of Chinese scholarship and literature. So I think this is extremely meaningful today. Because global communication is not simply about translation, it is also about creating understanding between civilizations. And how do Western readers understand Chinese literature? How do the translators carry not only words, but also consciousness, symbolism, emotion, and cultural memory? And how can Chinese literature enter in the world literary system without losing its own spirit? And these are exactly the kinds of questions Professor Morato has been engaging with for many years. In 2025, he was awarded the title Friend of Chinese Literature by the China Writers Association. And I think this title is actually very beautiful because literature does not only belong to one country. True literature eventually belongs to the whole humanity itself. And people like Professor Morato are helping creating create that dialogue between cultures, language, and civilizations. And of course, Mr. Xuemo will be attend this dialogue. And let me introduce Mr. Xuemo. Xuemo was born in Western China, in Gansu, Liangzhou. He is one of the most prolific and inspiring contemporary Chinese writer. And he is the central figure of this dialogue. And the place he was born is a region deeply connected to the ancient Silk Road and desert civilization. Hi, people. Hello, welcome. Thank you for your time being here. Thank you. This evening, at 8 o'clock p.m., we are going to have a dialogue between Mr. Xue Mo and the international scholars. And I think this background is very important. When you read Xue Mo's works, you can feel strongly about the atmosphere of the desert, loneliness, suffering, spirituality, survival, and transcendence. So the desert in his work is not only a geographical landscape, it is also a spiritual landscape. Xue Mo is a national first-class writer in China and also vice chairman of the Gansu Writers Association. Over the years, he has written more than eight books, and his works have been translated into more than 20 languages, with nearly 60 international editions published worldwide. He has been nominated 3 times for the Modern Literature Prize, which is one of the highest highest literary honors in China. He has also won many international literary awards, including the New York Big Book Award and the Independent Press Award in the United States. And in 2026, he became the only Chinese writer invited to the Oxford Literary Festival. And beyond awards and titles, I think what truly makes Xue Mo special is something deeper. His works constantly explore the relationship between suffering and awakening, between human desire and inner freedom, between reality and transcendence, between history, mythology, spirituality, and human consciousness. 神话 mythology. Many scholars today describe his literary style as spiritual realism, because his novels do not only describe external events. They also explore the hidden psychological and spiritual dimensions of human life. His long epic 索萨朗 is considered the first modern epic of its kind in Chinese literary history. And many his talks and works on Laozi, Buddhism, consciousness, and self-inner cultivation have deeply influenced readers both in China and internationally. So tonight's dialogue is not simply an academic event. It is also a part of a much larger conversation. Can literature help modern humanity rediscover meaning? The spiritual awareness, can spiritual consciousness still exist in the modern world? And can Chinese literature become part of the future dialogue of world civilization? Okay, next I will introduce Professor Dr. Zhao Shouhui. The PhD University of Sydney, is the founding professor for Chinese program at the University of Bergen. He has been teaching and researching Chinese language and culture in 6 countries since his completion of master study at Renmin University of China in 1988. Professor Zhao's academic interest includes Chinese applied linguistic and language policy analysis, and he has authored 6 academic monographs and textbooks. His research appears in both Chinese and English and Chinese. He serves on the editorial boards of 6 journals, such as Current Issues of Language Planning, Routledge, and Journal of Asia Pacific Communication, John Benjamin's. So, hi Goofy. Yes, I'm reading from my phone. Yeah, I need the translation. First time I don't like my country because we're not there in your breathing style in my country. Really, your office, well, really very lucky. Thank you for your, yeah, thank you for your kind words. You know, this Professor Zhao Shouhui, he is the founding professor of the Chinese program at the University of Bergen in Norway. Yeah, and it is very meaningful because building a Chinese program in a foreign university is not simply about teaching vocabulary or grammar. It is not got caught. It is normal. Why say that? And it also means building a bridge between cultures. And it means helping another civilization understand how Chinese people think, speak, and view the world. And he has spent decades observing how Chinese culture is understood internationally. His academic interests include Chinese, applied linguistic and language policy analysis, applied linguistic policy analysis. So his academic interests include Chinese applied linguistics and language policy analysis. Now, for many people, language policy may sound like a very academic term, but actually, language shapes the way people think. Language shape identity. Language shape cultural memory. And language also shapes how civilizations communicate with one another. So when scholars study language policy, they are also studying how culture survives, transforms, and spreads in the modern world. Professor Zhao has authored 6 academic monographs and textbooks. And his research has been published in both English and Chinese. He also serves on the editorial boards of several important international journals, including journals such as Current Issues in Language Planning and Journal of Asia Pacific Communication. And I think scholars like Professor Zhao represent something very important today because globalization is not only about economy and science and technology. It is also about language, about communication. Hi, Goofy. What's your favorite journal? Uh, um, in the early 20th, I read from my 16th to the early 20th, I read many journals, many journals. They are many journals and in different kind. There are literary, about fashion, and many things. So for a very long time, I haven't read journal, so I cannot tell which is my favorite journal. Yes, Gopi, of course, there is a large library in Xuemo Academy. Yes. So globalization is not only about, it is about language, it also about communication and about where the cultures can truly understand one another beyond the stereotypes and the superficial impression. And this is maybe also why the international dialogues tonight are becoming more and more important, because literature, language, and translation may become one of the few remaining ways for humanity to still deeply communicate across civilization. No, I'm not showing that. It is closed. I'm not going anywhere. When we are doing the live stream, we just sit here in the live in the office for doing the live stream, not going anywhere else. Okay, another professor, Dr. Suri. Dr. Suri is professor in translation at Northwest University. She If you have anything you want to talk about, you can leave your message here. We are going to have a Zoom dialogue, international dialogue between Xuemo and the international scholars every week. So if you're interested, you can. Mm, no, I have answered that. I'm not going to show Xuemo Cat library, because when we are working here in the office, uh, we are staying in the office for live stream. No one is walking around, walking randomly when doing live stream. Just sit here and talk. And what we are show here is what Xuemo talks, but not how his library or the academy looks like. So if you are interested in his philosophy and mind, you can buy his book on Amazon. What we are showing here is Xuemo Mythology. Yes, not personal life. We want readers here, but not like, yes. We want the real readers here who will be interested in Xuemo philosophy and Mythology. OK，根据之前介绍的这几位专家来先形成一遍有可能用到的词汇和内容，可以扩展一下。Then China birds are very hardworking and own houses and cars, bank balance. Also, then I am respect China culture. Okay. Yeah, thank you for your support. The best support for us is to read Xuemo's work. Yes. No, we are doing the live stream not for someone companion us, but to share Xuemo's works. So more readers will there will be more readers. No other reasons. Just more readers. Yes. Corona, it is your view about China. Okay. Okay, it's quite interesting. Yeah, think positive way. Yes. Good. We are sharing here. We are doing a live stream here to that more readers will come to Xuemo's work and will benefit from Xuemo's work. That is our yes, our purpose of doing the live stream. So as we introduce these international scholars and their academic background, I think we can also begin to notice something very interesting. Although they come from different countries and different academic disciplines, but many of them are actually exploring similar questions. Questions about literature, questions about consciousness, questions about translation, questions about culture and civilization. And past, most importantly, questions about meaning in the modern world. So I also want to share some important uh, vocabulary and concepts that may appear in these dialogues. Because once you begin to understand these words, you also begin understanding the deeper structure behind the conversation itself. One important term is world literature. World literature does not simply mean literature from different countries. Hi, Goofy. What will happen if you buy 4 books of Xue Mo? Then you will find the answer. What will happen if you buy after reading 4 of Xuemo's work? You will find the answer because everyone will have different understanding of the same work. So you will find the answer and you can tell us. You can share your feedback, your ideas, your thoughts about Xuemo's work. Yes, you will find that. You will find the answer, Goofy. Sorry, I don't suggest any fashion journals. I don't know about that. I only recommend Xuemo's work. Uh, yes, here it is Xuemo, Xuemo community. So you can search for Amazon for Xuemo, Xuemo, Xuemo on Amazon. Yes. So world literature does not simply mean literature from different countries. It refers to the literature that it refers to the literature capable of crossing cultural boundaries and speaking to humanity as a whole. In other words, when a literary work can still move readers from completely different civilizations, language, and historical backgrounds. It begins entering the space of world literature. And I think this is one of the reasons international scholars are becoming interested in Xuemo's works. And another important concept is spiritual realism. Traditional realism often focuses on external social reality, but spiritual realism attempts to explore the invisible inner dimension of human life. Hi, girl hunter, you are not banned. Hi, patiently happy. Message I like to hear in return home and ask for money from her. Okay, thank you for coming by, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Hi, Village Gaming, thank you for coming by. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all your support. Tonight we are going to have a dialogue between Xue Mo and the international scholars at 8 p.m. Beijing time. And you can also join, if you're interested, you can join the dialogue. And the spiritual realism attempts to explore the invisible inner dimensions of human life, such as suffering, consciousness, fear, desire, awakening, inner freedom, and the relationship between human soul and the larger universe. So this is why many of Xuemo's works, novels feel both realistic and mystical at the same time. Another word we may hear often is translation studies. Many people think translation simply means converting words from one language into another, but real literary translation is far more complicated. Because language carries culture, it carries memory, emotion, religion, symbolism, historical experience, even silence itself. So translators are not merely translators. In many ways, they are also cultural interpreters between civilizations. Another fascinating idea is comparative literature. Comparative literature asks questions like, how do different civilizations describe suffering? How do different cultures understanding transcendence? Why do myths from different countries often resemble one another? Why are humans across history constantly searching for meaning? Why are humans across history constantly searching for meaning? And honestly, I think these questions are becoming more important than ever today. Because modern society has become extremely material and technological, but many people feel spiritually lost. People have information, but not wisdom. People have entertainment, but not inner peace. People are connected online but feel disconnected internally. And perhaps this is why literature, philosophy, spirituality, and cross-cultural dialogue are returning again. Because humanity is once again searching for something deeper than consumption and speed. And another term we make here tonight is hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is the study of interpretation. How do humans interpret texts? How do humans interpret texts? How do we interpret symbols, myth, history, religion, and language? And perhaps even more deeply, how do humans interpret existence itself? And I think one hidden topic behind all this discussion is this. Can literature still help humanity awaken? Not politically, not commercially, not commercially. Hi, welcome our old friend here. Thank you for your time being here. So can literature still help humanity awaken? Not politically, not commercially, not but spiritually. Can literature still help people understand suffering, understand themselves, understand consciousness, understand compassion? And perhaps this is exactly why dialogues like tonight's matter. Okay, next I'm going to introduce Professor Dr. Su Rui. OK，刚才那份文件你还有资料的吧？根据他的这些介绍，生成直播的介绍，然后根据也搜一下他的一些论文啊或者什么东西，可以好好的围绕他介绍一下，也围绕着今天的谈话主题。Interesting topic. Professor Su Rui, yeah. Professor Su Rui is a professor of translation studies at Northwest universities in China. She's also a doctoral supervisor, a senior translator, and an important scholar in the field of literature and cultural translation. Her academic work spans translation studies, intercultural communication, Chinese literature in global contexts, and Chinese American literary studies. And what I personally find fascinating is that her work reflects a larger question facing our era. How can Chinese culture really truly enter into global discourse? Not merely as information, not merely as exotic imagery, but as living thought, as living literature, as something capable of genuinely communicating with humanity. And Professor Su has held visiting sessions and academic exchange at institutions such as Harvard University, Cambridge University, and Oxford University. And I think this international academic experience is extremely important today because true cultural dialogue cannot happen in isolation. It requires long-term communication between civilizations, translation between languages, and even translation between different ways of thinking. Professor Su has also participated in many projects related to literary translation, Chinese cultural transmission, and cross-cultural interpretation. And this connects deeply to tonight's dialogue, because many of today's dialogue discussions are not only about literature itself, they are about how literature travels across civilizations, how meaning survives translation, how symbols change across cultures, and whether spiritual or philosophical ideas can still move readers in completely different societies. And one concept closely connected to Professor Su's field is transculturality. 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 Today, cultures are no longer isolated from one another. Chinese literature influences the West, Western philosophy influences Asia, and translation itself creates new meanings. So literature today is no longer moving in only one direction. It is becoming a global dialogue. And perhaps this is exactly why scholars like Professor Su are becoming increasingly important. Because in the future, one of humanity's greatest challenges may not be technology. It may be whether different civilizations can still understand one another deeply, whether language can still carry wisdom instead of only information. Whether literature can still preserve humanity in an age dominated by speed, algorithms, and consumption. So tonight's international dialogue is also part of that larger search. We are talking about the dialogue. And next, I'm going to introduce yeah. Okay, I'm looking for the professor's information. So another attendee is Professor David S. Hosset. David S. Hosset is professor of English and head of the School of Education and English at the University of Nottingham, Ningbo, China. He has published articles in studies romanticism 等等，所以这是他介绍一部分。我想你的文件里应该还有读取他的介绍，根据他的介绍，然后他所发表过的论文，我们可以给他进行一个介绍。Now, not going over another book, but an international dialogue between Mr. Xue Mo and the international scholars in the evening. So David S. Hosset, Professor Hosset, his academic background is especially interesting because his research bridges literature, mythology, fantasy, philosophy, and literary and culture. He has published articles in journals such as Studies in Romanticism on the Net, Critique, and Christianity and Literature. And these journals are deeply connected to the study of imagination, symbolism, mythology, and the spiritual dimensions of literature. Hi, Pat. Hello, are you new here? Please subscribe to our channel. Imagination, symbolism, mythology, and the spiritual dimension of literature. Okay, thank you for your subscription. And Professor Hosset is also the author of books such as Writing That Makes Sense, Critical Thinking in College Conversation, and the Transcendent Vision of Poetic Fantasy. And one particularly important phrase here is mythopoetic fantasy. Mythopoetic means myth-making. Myth-making. It refers to literature that creates symbolic worlds capable of expressing deeper truth about humanity. And honestly, many great literary traditions throughout history have relied on myth to speak about reality. Through the human history, many great literary traditions will have relied on myth to speak about reality. Not because mythology is unreal, but because sometimes symbolic stories will reveal truth that ordinary realism cannot fully express. And this connects deeply to tonight's discussion on Xuemo literature. Because many scholars describe Xuemo's works as a form of spiritual realism. His novels are grounded in real history, real geography, and real human suffering. But at the same time, they also contain mystical, symbolic, and transcendental dimension. And this is exactly the kind of literary territory Professor Hosat has long been researching. His research interests include romanticism, Gothic literature, science fiction, and fantasy literature. Hi, Xue Mo, welcome. Rice and vegetables and meat. Very normal life. Thank you for asking. Yeah, they are researching this. The romanticism, the Gothic literature, the science fiction, and fantasy literature. Now, this may sound unrelated at first, but actually they all explore one central question. How does literature express the invisible human existence? Fear, wonder, faith, the unknown, the supernatural, the unconscious mind, the longing for transcendence. And I think this is why Professor Jose's question to Xuemo is so interesting. He asked about the relationship between spirituality, the supernatural, and the real historic reality in Xuemo's novels. And honestly, this is a very profound literary question. Because throughout literary history, many civilizations have struggled with the same tension. How do we speak about transcendence while remaining grounded in reality? Oh, Gothic literary is the first time you're okay. How do we speak about transcendence while remaining grounded in reality? And how do we talk about spirit without escaping history? How do we describe the invisible dimensions of existence without losing human truth? And perhaps this is exactly why literature remains important today. Because modern society explains many things scientifically, but science alone cannot fully explain meaning, suffering, beauty, myth, love, or spiritual longing. Science alone cannot fully explain meaning, suffering, beauty, myth, mythology, love, and spiritual belonging. And literature continues trying to explore those deeper human realities. And let me see the question by Professor Hosset. Okay, Professor David Hosset will ask a question to Xue Mo. His question is like this. I am fascinated by the way you located the fantastical elements. Fantastical elements of your spiritual realism within geographical locations with real historical contexts. What are the relationships between the spiritual and the supernatural in your novels and real history? What are the relationships between the spiritual and the supernatural in your novels and real history? Be it recorded national history or local histories pertaining to cultures, villages, and individuals. What do you hope to achieve aesthetically and thematically by locating the supernatural within an identifiable natural and historical realm? I think Professor Hosset's question may become one of Hi Adil, who is Xue Mo? Xue Mo is one of the most prolific and inspiring contemporary Chinese writer from Western China. He has written over 80 titles with 200 editions and have been translated into 28 languages. Yeah, it is cutting out. The network doesn't work very well. Sorry about that. And so Xuemo's work is very different than the other writers' work because his aim of writing is to benefit the sentient being. So you will always find your inner light is being illuminated after reading his book. Your inner strength is recovered after reading Xuemo's works. So, and you will find your inner peace, even you are suffering from external phenomena. You can still have the inner peace with you. If you are new here, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much. So tonight we are going to have a dialogue between Mr. Xue Mo and the international scholars. And one of the professor will be attended this meeting is Professor Hosset. And his question may become one of the most fascinating questions of tonight's dialogue because his question goes directly into the heart of literature itself. He says that he's fascinated by the way Xuemo places fantastical and spiritual elements within real history and geographical settings. And honestly, this is a very deep literary observation. Because in many modern novels today, fantasy and reality are often separated. Fantasy becomes pure escapism. And Confucius was the most loved philosopher of China, and Zheng He the most loved navy commander of China. Confucius, of course, Confucius, yeah, Confucius philosophy influenced China, the whole nation, and influenced the society, the behavior of the Chinese people. Yes, we are deeply and mostly influenced by Confucius. And the other two important cultures in China is Buddhism and Taoism. Taoism influences the smallest part. Hi, Joe. Hello. Why are you asking this question? You from America? No, I haven't been to New York before. Um, you can try. You can try his work. The spiritual series. One is the world is ideal. The world is a reflection by the world is a reflection of the mind. And the other one is reclaim the throne of your heart, both by Xue Mo. And they both are available on Amazon. You can search for Xuemo, Xuemo, Xuemo for these two books. The world is a reflection of the mind. Is an insight of wisdom in traditional cultivation. Only those whose cultivation and realization reach the highest level are able to have this kind of wisdom and level of perception. Only those who truly understand this principle will easily merge with the yoga apart from philosophy and truly manifest what we often call illuminating mind and seeing its true nature. And another book is Reclaim the Throne of Your Heart. It is about master your mind and master your destiny. So Reclaim the Throne of Your Heart is a wisdom guide that focuses on the mind and the nature of the mind, teaching modern individuals how to transform from slaves of the external world into masters of their own minds. Xuemo regards cultivating spiritual autonomy as the most important practice in life and distills the traditional Mahamudra yoga into a form of mindful yoga that is easily understood by contemporary readers. Wow, how interesting. He's the first Chinese man I see with a facial hair beard. Really? Okay. So in many modern novels today, fantasy and reality are often separated. Fantasy becomes pure escapism, and realism becomes cold social description. But in Xuemo's works, the supernatural, mystical, and the spiritual often emerge directly from the real history, real village, real suffering, and the real human experience. What is the British Empire? What is English British Empire? In Xue Mo's works, the supernatural, the mystical, and the spiritual often emerge from the real history, real village, real suffering, and real human experience. And I think this is why Professor Hosset uses the term spiritual realism. Because these novels are not escaping reality, but they are actually trying to penetrate reality more deeply to explore the invisible dimension hidden beneath ordinary life. Memory, karma, fear, desire, loneliness, faith, death, awakening, and humanity is longing for transcendence. And Professor Hosset then asks a very important question. What is the relationship between spirituality, the supernatural, and the real history? And this question is far bigger than literature itself. Because throughout the whole human civilization, the mythology, religions, epics, and spiritual tradition have always existed alongside history. So ancient people did not separate reality and spirituality as sharply as modern society often does. For them, mountains had spirit, deserts had memory, dreams carried meaning, and even suffering itself can become a path toward awakening. So perhaps what Xuemo's literature is doing is reconnecting these dimensions that modernity has separated. Reality and spirit, history and mythology, suffering and transcendence, human limitation and infinite consciousness. And this is why Professor Hosset's final question is so beautiful. He asks, what aesthetic and thematic meaning can emerge when the supernatural elements is placed within a recognizable historical world? And honestly, I think one answer may be this. It allows literature to remind us that reality itself is deeper than what we normally perceive. So the question again, when the supernatural element put into a real and recognizable history world, what aesthetic and thematic meaning can emerge. And on this, I think one answer maybe like this: it allows literature to remind us that reality itself is deeper than what we normally perceive. Hi, CJ, welcome. I think the literature reminds us that reality itself is deeper than what we normally perceive, and that human existence is not merely material, that history is not only political events, and that behind ordinary life there may still exist mystery, symbolism, consciousness, and spiritual longing. And perhaps this is why literature still matters today, because literature continues asking the question modern society often forgets to ask. 继续发展一下这个主题。So the modern society often assumes that the reality is only what can be measured physically. If something cannot be scientifically proven, many people immediately dismiss it as fantasy or illusion. But literature has always known that human beings live in multiple layers of reality at the same time. There is physical reality, there is also psychological reality, emotional reality, symbolic reality, spiritual reality, collective memory, cultural unconsciousness, and most of the time, those invisible life dimension affect people even more deeply than visible events. For example, fear itself is invisible, but fear can shape history. Faith is invisible, but faith can move civilization. Memory is invisible, but memory can determine the fate of generations. And perhaps this is why the spiritual realism becoming increasingly important today, because modern people surrounded by the material abundance, but internally many feel fragmented and empty. So people can explain the external world very clearly, but often do not understand their own consciousness. People can connect globally through technology, but cannot deeply connect with themselves anymore. And I think this is one of the reasons why literature exploring spirituality, mythology, and transcendence is returning worldwide. Not because people want to escape reality, but because people are beginning to realize that pure material reality alone cannot fully satisfy the human soul. So the spirituality, mythology, and the transcendence is returning worldwide. Not because people want to escape reality, but because people are beginning to realize that the pure material reality alone cannot satisfy the human soul. And this is also why myths remain powerful throughout human history. Myths are not simply false stories. Myth, mythology are symbolic. Myths are symbolic language through which civilizations attempt to understand existence. In mythology, monsters often represent fear. Deserts symbolize spiritual trials. Journeys symbolize inner transformation. Death symbolizes awakening or rebirth. And when literature combines mythic dimensions with real history, something very powerful happens. Because readers begin feeling that history itself is not merely external events. History also contains invisible emotional and spiritual currents. Hi, Olabi. Hi, Anang, XYZ. Hello, welcome. Please subscribe to our channel if you're new here. Thank you for your support. And so history also contains invisible, emotional, and spiritual currents. And perhaps this is why so many great literary traditions around the world contain supernatural or mystical dimensions. From Dante to Dostoevsky, from Kafka to Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Marcus, Gabriel Garcia, from Buddhist stories to Greek mythology, from Tolkien to ancient Chinese classics. Human beings constantly using symbolic words to speak about truth that ordinary language cannot fully express. If you want more views, please fix audio. How can we send money to invest a better phone? So interesting. Thank you. So human beings constantly use symbolic words to speak about truth that ordinary language cannot fully express. And maybe this is also connected to why the desert appears so often in Xuemo's literature. Because the desert itself is almost archetypal across many civilizations. Deserts symbolize emptiness, silence, loneliness, purification, temptation, and awakening. When all distractions disappear, humans are finally forced to confront themselves. And maybe that is what spiritual literature ultimately tries to do. Not to entertain people temporarily, but to bring humans back into confrontation within their own existence. To ask again, so to bring humans back into confrontation with their own existence. To ask again, who am I? What is suffering? What is freedom? And what remains when all external identities disappear? So that's the big difference from Xue Mo's works and to the others. So Xue Mo's works are available on Amazon. You can search for Xue Mo, Xuemo, Xue Mo on Amazon, and look for his works. Yeah, thank you for your support today. Hope you will find Xue Mo's work can nourish the soul and can illuminate the inner light. Okay, if you're new here, please subscribe to our channel. Good blessing from China. Thank you so much. Thank you. Please subscribe.